This is pretty much similar to like about a couple months ago, the commission had reviewed and acted favorably on Kuleana rum out in North Kohala. In that situation, they had like about 20 some odd acres of land, and they were going to use about 14 or 15 acres for sugarcane to use as a source for their distillery facility. It's no different in concept than that particular project. Just by way of background to what the applicant wants to do is pretty much similar to the Kuleana rum one. They kind of want to integrate the agricultural activity and eventually come up with a product that expands or enhances the agricultural activity. So they got this property, and this property, just for those of you who may be familiar or not familiar with this area, the historical use of the property. The two large sheds were used agriculturally a number of years ago. They had like a tomato, they had like cucumbers, and subsequent to that, it was converted into like an orchid farm, and that's the reason why you see a large warehouse building that consists of about 10,000 square feet. So from the applicant's standpoint, this property was almost like a natural, for their own operation, because you already had existing facility. There was an existing single-family residence on the property, and that dwelling would be used for either employee or for security purposes. Much of the land has been in the past cultivated into agricultural activity. That would continue. The whole idea is to have as much of the product, if they can, to be farmed on the property, and whatever that can't be, then they would have it like kind of sourced in. The thought was to have like tea planted so that they can generate okolehau. The question I had asked the staff was that one of the first phases perhaps that they would like to produce would be like the going into a coffee liqueur. And so to do that, they would have to bring in the beginning like the coffee, do the roasting, and then from there do the distilling operation. Sugarcane is also like one of the thing that he has in mind, and so that would convert into like rum. There was also the question as far as like the traffic, and I think that's very pertinent especially dealing in the Kona area. So they were very mindful of that, and the heavy traffic generator obviously would be by the visitors, because you have like 10 to 15 employees that would be staggered along, throughout the day. And for the most part, like the visitor component is not going to be like a walk-in basis. They're going to be all by appointment. And so if it's by appointment, you have like a 60-minute or 90-minute kind of situation, then it's kind of staggered, throughout the course of the day. The operation would be, the visitors would be coming in anyway from 9 o'clock and would terminate at sunset, approximately like 6 p.m. Aside from that, because the staff covered everything, I really don't have much more to add, but if there are questions that the commissioners may have, I'd be more than willing to go into them.
This is a big piece of property, 70 acres, and the permit will cover 7.5 plus the nursery. Are there any plans for the balance of the property at this time?
The balance of the property would be used agriculturally. The structural areas are pretty much limited because, as the staff had indicated, the north and south end of the properties are in the flood zone, in a zone AE zone. So it pretty much like limits what you can do on, from a structural standpoint. One thing I also kind of wanted to mention, and it was kind of pointed out in the staff's background report, that there's not going to be any substantial expansion to what they have there. But over the course of time, they may find a need to kind of tweak the existing building just to make it a little bit more efficient, because right now all they're doing is just taking an existing structure and just trying to partition that off. But during the course of the operation, then they may find a need to maybe knock off a portion and then expand a certain area. But at any rate, the whole idea is to kind of keep it within a 10,000 square foot operation.
Would Joe Meaner and Sharon Wilford come forward, please?
My name is Sharon Williford. I wasn't familiar with this, but I am familiar with a lot of the projects going on around Kona, so I like to continue my role as a kia'i protector of the area and keep an eye on what's going on. And I have a few thoughts and questions about the project. Number one, the traffic on that road is stopped almost 24/7 these days. Perhaps there was an older permit, or whenever someone said it's okay, you're not going to be a problem for us. But we need to look at that date and see when someone made that decision and have someone do a traffic study, because it is stopped most of the time when I go in and out of you all know how the traffic is right now. I was wondering what products are going to be used, and has this been studied? Have you guys looked at what it is? He mentioned casually, well, it might be sugarcane, it might be, I'm not sure what, I didn't hear anything really else mentioned. We want to be sure we're not putting in GMO products that are going to pollute the area. We want to know if the growing procedures, if they're using pesticides and things like that, because we must be very aware now. We're poisoning our children, we're poisoning our land. We need to wake up and take command of everything. So I just want us to really take a look at what they're proposing and have the note. There's a lot of neighbors. I wondered if they've been given a chance to be informed of what's going to happen. Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Patrick Jones. I'm a resident and a board member at Kona Villas, the property on the opposite side of Kuakini Highway. My main concern were the speed on Kuakini Highway right now. It's 45 miles an hour and changes to 35 miles an hour right at our gate, which is directly north of the subject property on the opposite side of the street. Traffic is pretty fast there, and coming around the turn, it presents some blind spots. There's also an issue on the floodplain and the rock wall that's deteriorating, that consistently sends water down on our property. And Joe, I believe, can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, my name is Joe Niemer. I also am a 15-year resident of Kona Villas, and I'm also on the board of directors of the Homeowners Association. So we do represent the 72 homeowners of Kona Villas, and as Patrick said, we have two issues. They're both safety issues. They do not result or have nothing to do with the use of the property, but they're safety issues. The traffic issue is actually quite significant. I mean, the traffic going northbound on Kuakini changes from 45 to 35 directly in front of Kona Villa entrance. And also the entrance egress to this property would appear to be very close to a blind curve, and unfortunately the drivers in our community that see the 45 speed limit have a tendency to go 50, 55 and faster. They do not slow down to 35 until they get closer to Pottery Terrace in Jackie Ray's. Conversely, heading southbound on Kuakini, they see the 35 speed limit changes to 45 in front of Kona Villas, and that speed limit, and they see it a few hundred yards early, so by the time they get to Kona Villas, they're substantially faster. The second piece of it is the flood wall directly across from Kona Villas on the northwest end of this property, which is in imminent status of failure. If this wall fails, which it most likely will, the next or the following large tropical storm, it will substantially inundate and damage Kona Villas. As long as something can be done with this property, this wall needs to be repaired. It is repaired, doesn't need to be replaced, it needs to be repaired. So that's our comments. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you.
I'd like for the applicant to address the drainage issue and the rock wall. Would that be better to be done first?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Would the applicant come forward again, please, if you would like to clarify?
Okay, first in the area of the traffic safety and the potential, like the blind spot, I'd like to kind of like note that the staff is aware of that, and as a result has widely recommended condition number 8, which reads that all new driveway connections, et cetera, and access, including the provision of adequate site distances, shall meet with the approval of Department of Public Works. Although this refers to new driveway connections, I believe that if the commission so want, then this driveway connection can also apply to the existing driveway connection. And I think it would also behoove the applicant to make sure that there is adequate site distance related to the existing driveway if they're going to use it. Condition 8, relates specifically to the new driveway connections, but My only recommendation, and then maybe this is subject to the owner's approval, would be to expand this condition to include existing driveway connections as well. So that would pretty much address the site distance issue. Relative to the drainage, by code already, any activity done on the property would have to address the drainage requirements. Any project-generated water would have to be contained on site. In this situation here, they'd have to come in for a plan approval for all of the existing structures and their proposed improvements. And the plan approval process requires the submission of a Department of Public Works approved drainage plan as part of the application process, and that's got to be incorporated into it. And whatever the drainage plan calls for, it has to be implemented prior to issuance of an occupancy permit. I think that what the concerns that were raised relative to drainage is really like not project generated as much as like what the existing condition is, from the Mauka area, just kind of flowing on both the north end and the south end, of the subject property. You want to expand it a bit more? I'm not so much familiar, relative to what they're talking about on the wall fronting Kuakini Highway, and whether that needs to be improved or what.
I believe that is referring to the State Inventory of Historic Properties, Site 14089, which doesn't serve the purpose of flood mitigation. So that would be, I think, two separate issues, right? With flood mitigation, and that would have to be separate from the treatment of the historic site there, 14089.
Yeah, 14089 is an existing, that's an existing wall. It was just recorded. They didn't call for its physical preservation.
That wall is not a flood mitigation wall.
It's not.
Right
no.
there, no.
No, it's not. It was just a boundary wall.
Correct, yep. For me, looking at it, I see that all of the development is taking place outside of the floodway zone.
That's correct.
So there's no impact on what's existing now on the floodway. I think that it's something that you guys will probably be working with the neighbors on to address together as the need arises.
It'll have to be addressed largely because, if in fact flooding does occur, then it'll also affect this property. So it becomes
absolutely.
more like a community effort in terms of.
Yep.
And you are correct, Commissioner Butusek, in the sense that the area of the special permit is totally outside of all of this floodway area. And the focus is primarily on just utilizing existing structures and existing improvements on the property.
So the wall's not in the setback, the county road maintenance, or is it on the property?
Question.
According to the map, it's on the subject property and
Yeah.
not on the county roadway.
That is in fact a.
Sure. Hold on. Yeah, let me go ahead and you may be seated, and then we'll hear one more. If you would like to come forward again and have a response to this.
The wall in question is in fact a flood retention wall. It's 10 feet at the base at the south end of it. It is 2 feet at the base at the north end of it. It has been there since our property has been there. It has been damaged substantially and prevented numerous floods. It has not prevented a flood down Kuakini about 3 years ago, but if it goes away, it will in fact flood our property. There are cattle walls to the south of that, which obviously are not flood mitigation, but this wall is.
Okay.
It is in a flood zone.
And is it, to your knowledge, on this subject property?
I cannot attest to the boundary lines of the
Gotcha.
property.
The only maps that we have of the subject property
I
show
would
the
suggest
cattle
you
wall.
look at the property before making those statements then.
I move that the application for special permit docket number 19-205 be approved based on the planning director's recommendation, which shall be adopted.
Second?
Agricultural processing areas and destinations for agricultural goods are a huge need in the community to encourage agriculture more broadly.
I agree also. I'll be supporting the motion. I think we all, as commissioners, we all have these concerns about traffic, drainage, flooding. But in general, I like the project where it's located. It is in the urban expansion area, so we could be talking a completely different project, and we're not. So I'm also in favor.
This has been an ongoing issue for years as far as the threat of flooding and all of that. And so will the project cause it to get worse? And it doesn't seem like it to me. So this is something like Commissioner Carr-Smith said that I guess maybe all the parties involved need to collaborate on how they can, prevent any kind of problem here on this property.
Can I make just one comment on the drainage issue? I think that the way it was described earlier, it would seem very unusual for the property owner to make all of the extensive improvements that would, kind of address properties on the Mackay side. So I'm just kind of speculating, but I would think that there's more like an improvement made within the government right-of-way. But nevertheless, I think it was pointed out, I think it behooves all of the affected property owners, which includes the applicant, to do that research, and if it falls within the government right-of-way, to have that conversation with the Public Works Department to see what kind of added mitigation could be done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Vatusik?
Aye.
Commissioner Carr-Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Yates?
Aye.
Commissioner Shimaoka?
Aye.
And Chair Unger.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Applicants, you'll be notified in writing of the decision by the Planning Commission. Thank you.